So welcome to NCTC. I'm Mark Madison, the organizer of our Conservation Lecture Series, which we are very happy to be co-sponsoring tonight with our good friends, the Potomac Valley Audubon Society. And please do go to their events. Tonight's main event is something very close to my heart. My beagle and I were watching Jeopardy last week, and a bird flew into my glass door. It got up and flew away, but I'm not sure if it made it or not. And I thought, I wish I knew how to protect protect the birds from my glass door, and that's what you're going to learn about tonight. I'm sure we've all had that experience with windows or lights attracting birds, and we really have an expert to speak to us tonight. We're very fortunate that Joelle Gehring has come all the way to Shepherdstown, West Virginia, to talk to us about making the world safe for birds and people, fixing lights and windows. And let me just tell you about her impressive resume. Joelle is a biologist in the Division of Bird Conservation Permits and Regulations in the Migratory Bird Program of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There she works to reduce bird collisions with communication towers, lights, and glass, and she also leads the Council for the Conservation of Migratory Birds. Before she came to work for us, she actually worked for the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, where she worked with tower operators to minimize bird collisions with communication towers. She's a senior conservation scientist with Michigan State University, where she designed and supervised a multi-year landscape scale study of bird collisions with communication towers. She also studied wildlife interactions with wind energy facilities and used this data to improve turbine siting. Throughout her career, Dr. Gehring has used science and stakeholder input to develop and disseminate information on mainstreaming and cost-effective methods to reduce wildlife-human conflicts. So I hope from this brief abstract of Dr. Gehring, I've given you a slight impression of what an amazing expert she is on how to make the world safer for birds and people. She's come all the way here from Michigan, so please give a super warm welcome to Dr. Joelle Gehring.
That was a very nice introduction. Thank you. Actually, I think I wrote it, so I'm glad it was nice. Thank you very much. So let's make sure this is working. Back on. Okay, there we go. Well, thank you very much for coming here tonight, and I'm eager to share with you some of the information that I've learned and really developed for people like us over the past several years. You know, when I first started thinking about this issue, I thought this is a tall building issue, right? This is the skyscrapers in New York City, and this doesn't really apply to me as a homeowner, but it does. It applies to all of us. And we're going to learn more about that tonight and learn about what we can do to indeed make the world safer for birds and for ourselves. Okay, go down. There we go. All right, so I think I'm speaking to an audience that can really relate to this. Birds are a part of our lives. When I arrived here today, parked my car in the parking lot, walked up to this building, My ears were constantly listening. What did I hear? I heard 4 to 5 species I hadn't heard in the last several days when I was in downtown DC or Falls Church for a while. This is a beautiful place, and as we walk around and we listen, I don't know if when people were walking around looking at the different glass treatments, if they heard some birds that they recognized and brought a pleasant feeling to themselves. This is what birds do for us. Birds are constantly, they're the music of our lives, right? When we take the garbage out, when we walk the dog, when we take our kids to soccer practice, when we walk our kids to the school bus, birds are singing. I remember very vividly as a kid going to sleep. It's still light out in the summertime. I'm in Wisconsin. I have to go to bed early because I'm little, and the robins are singing. And I fell asleep to the sounds of robins, and I woke up to the sounds of robins. And so the songs of birds and their presence in our lives, they're always there, right? And we're always in their lives as well. They interact with us just as we interact with them. And it gives us the ability to make their lives a little safer when they're migrating. And so tonight we're going to talk about how we can do that and how closely related and integrated our lives are. We're not alone. I don't know, there's maybe 20, 30 of us in this room, but we are among the 96 million people in the United States that watch birds. We're not alone. There are a lot of people who care about birds and are interested in birds, and they spend a lot of money on birds as well. So this is a part of our economy, and it's a part of our neighbors and our families, etc. And it's also neat when we look at these data from the Fish and Wildlife Service, how these bird watchers, they come from all ages, income levels, education levels, races, and they're across the country. This is the American people. We watch birds and we enjoy birds, and sometimes we even spend money on birds. People enjoy birds, and birds are connected to us and what we do. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this webpage. This is Birdcast. It's a Cornell product, Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And they use the same radar that we use to look for storms coming and probably hurricanes a little bit on the edges, but tornadoes for sure. And they use these data to forecast and to identify volume or the number of birds that are moving across the United States. So this is for tonight, the night of September 12th. That's today, right? Yep. And 218 million birds are predicted to fly over the United States tonight while we're sleeping. So that's pretty cool. If you get on this website, you can actually see a live animation of the prediction of these birds. And what you'll see is that as the sun goes down tonight, about 10 p.m., when we're getting ready for bed, the birds start moving up, and they start going up into the area where the radar can detect them, and they start moving south. And tonight, if you look at this, after we're done, they're going to be moving kind of south and west, down towards their wintering grounds, right? And you're going to see them, they're all, right now, they're all kind of fueling, kind of probably gathering together in flocks as we're in this talk right now. But when the sun goes down, they're going to be going up, and they're going to be aloft, flying, and they're going to be navigating off of stellar constellations, which is just so cool. I still, after 25 years of working in this field, I still get goosebumps when I think about they're using stellar constellations on a planet, moving around a planet that's moving. So the stellar constellations are kind of visually moving to the birds, but they're navigating off of that. Some of them have hatched within months prior to this. So they're a couple months old. They're navigating off of the stars and polarization of light along the horizon and the magnetic fields of the planet and sunrise and sunset. And sometimes big landscape features like maybe the Potomac River. And they're moving down to a place where they're going to spend the winter because they have to, right? They eat bugs, so they have to do that. And then they're going to come all the way back up, sometimes to the exact same shrub or the exact same nest over a doorway or under a bridge. They're going to find it again. They don't have GPS. I needed a GPS to get here today. I looked at it frequently. They don't need that. And somehow they managed to do this. It's a dangerous thing because it takes a lot of energy to do that. And then when they land, they need to have food, they need to refuel, they need to rest so they can get up and do it again. Absolutely incredible. And dangerous too. They need to have a lot of things in place for them to be able to do this successfully. It's very risky. And tonight we're going to learn about how we can make it a little bit safer for them. Okay? So we're going to learn how we can help them just as we enjoy their songs and looking at them every day. So now we get to kind of the sad stuff. So these birds are on these long journeys, these long-distance migrant birds, and their populations are significantly declining. This is from a publication that came out in 2019, and it really demonstrated something that many of us as birders know, and that is we've lost a lot of birds in our lifetimes. And in my lifetime, we've lost about 30% of our birds, about almost 3 billion birds since 1970. And some species are doing better than others, some are doing worse than others, and our migratory songbirds are really struggling. And I remember what it was like. I remember what my son's 24. I remember teaching him the eastern meadowlark right outside our home. I don't think those eastern meadowlarks are there anymore. They've really declined at significant numbers. I remember riding my horse and hearing bobolink in the hay fields and in the pastures near him. They aren't there anymore. So I have seen, personally, I've observed this decline of birds in my lifetime. And it's hard to watch, and it's hard to feel helpless, but we're not in this situation. We are losing about 1 billion birds a year, with birds that are colliding with our homes and low-rise buildings. But this is something, and you'll learn by the end of the talk, that this is something we can change and something we can do something about. Each one of us can make a difference when it comes to this topic. So I want to point out a statistic that's on this slide, and that is that 99% of this 1 billion number is coming from homes and low-rise buildings. When I first started working on this topic, I thought, it's the skyscrapers. I'm going to get hired by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm going to go work on skyscrapers. That's not what this issue is about. Yes, tall buildings are involved in bird collisions. So is any building with glass. And think about how many skyscrapers or tall buildings you are aware of compared to how many homes, low-rise buildings. There's so many more homes and low-rise buildings. And that is related to this 99% of collisions. There's so many homes and low-rise buildings, meaning so many glass structures or lit structures on the landscape. So what does that mean? Gosh, there's so many homes, so many low-rise. What are we going to do? That means each one of us has a connection, right? This is our home. We just heard about a collision at, you and your dog were watching Jeopardy. It's my home. It's our dentist office. It's our places of worship. It's every building that we use. It could be, if it has glass, it could be related to a bird collision. So, again, this is our homes, and these are our low-rise facilities that we are using, which means we all have an opportunity to make a difference. So why are birds colliding with glass? Well, birds do not see glass or reflective surfaces as something they cannot fly through. We're used to seeing a rectangular hole in the side of a building, and we think there's a window there. Birds do not think that way. And so when they look at glass, they see the reflection of vegetation or sky, and they think that's habitat, that's sky I can fly through, etc. Oftentimes they also think if they see vegetation on the other side of it, like maybe a transparent noise barrier along a highway, they think they can fly through it to the habitat on the other side. So they don't understand that glass is a barrier, and that's something that we can help them understand, and you'll see a little bit later how we do that. Homes with bird feeders are also involved in about twice the number of collisions as homes without bird feeders. So I have a bird feeder, many of us probably do. And that's one way that we can get closer to birds, we can enjoy them, we can kind of watch the migrants come through. I get great joy out of watching the juncos come through in the wintertime, and the white-crowned sparrows coming through in the wintertime. Love it. But those birds are also at higher risk of collisions because I have my windows right near my bird feeders. I've taken care of that, so they're doing okay, and we'll learn how to do that tonight. But just be aware that homes with bird feeders are at double the risk of creating a collision risk to birds. And many of us know that, and we want to change it. My mom was one of these people. During the pandemic, she fed her birds faithfully, enjoyed that, told me who was there, who was not there for birds. She also was killing a lot of birds. And we've since resolved that for her, and she's never been happier about that. So also we have nighttime collision issues. So I talked about daytime collisions and the reflections in glass and of sky and vegetation in the glass. But what about the nighttime collisions? Well, we are very aware that birds are attracted into light. We don't completely understand why, but light seems to attract and disorient these migratory birds. These birds their vision's not that much different than ours, and they don't have great night vision. They're really evolved to be around during the day and to function during the day. But during migration, they're active at night, and their vision is not that great. So they're actually attracted to and disoriented by lights, which can be very dangerous to them. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but let's talk about what we can do. There is hope for this situation. These fixes are easy. Some of them are very cost effective, and they work. So the idea is that we need to make sure the birds are aware that glass is an obstacle. Okay? And we do that by providing a 2-inch by 2-inch pattern on the outside of the glass, the exterior. If we do it on the inside, which is easier, right? Especially if it's a second-story window, it's much easier sometimes, but it doesn't work nearly as well. It may not work at all. These patterns need to be on the exterior surface of the glass in a 2-inch by 2-inch pattern. Why not 2-inch by 4-inch, which is something that we kind of thought about in the past, because hummingbirds are tiny and they think they can fly through those little 4-inch spaces. So we need 2-inch by 2-inch patterns. This can be done with stickers, stripes, films, Zen curtains, soap, paint. There are a diversity of aesthetics, methods, and costs associated with this. It can be done for nearly free. This happens to be one of my windows at my house with the dots on it. I don't even notice the dots there anymore. They are incredible, and they work perfectly well. Here's an example of the Byrd curtain. You guys saw a similar version if you went on the Byrd tour, and it's at the end of this hallway, and it's just paracord hanging down. I have some of that at my house as well. Works extremely well. It's also very cost effective. I made a paracord Byrd curtain while I was watching a movie with my son. It works extremely well. This person on the right-hand side is actually applying tempera paint. Again, it's that proximity to one another that is most important. Another example, different aesthetic, different cost. This is a film with tiny stripes in it that's effective. When you first look at this picture, you may not notice the dots on the glass, but it is highly effective. Hardly changed the aesthetic, but almost eliminated or did eliminate bird collisions with that building. This is one of our buildings, actually, one of our Fish and Wildlife Service buildings. If you have outdoor screens, external screens on your windows, that works. That's enough. At my house, I have screens on the lower half of some of my windows and not on the upper half. So I need to treat the upper half of some of those windows. But that can be another really effective way. Or some people put netting. It's a little more work intensive and a different aesthetic, but that can work as well. So the picture on the right has some netting on those boards that come out. There are also films, and these films can be printed. This is like bus wrap. Again, it needs to be on the outside surface of the glass, but they can be have many different aesthetics. The building on our right is one of our Fish and Wildlife Service buildings in Region 3 and along Lake Erie. And then the building on the left is a Michigan DNR building. But these have a little bit different aesthetic. It's a little more visible to people, but it can be very pretty too if you put pictures on it. Some of these products are actually made to fit on a sliding glass door. I think that's you mentioned where your bird collision happened recently, and they fit perfectly on those size doors. Work very effectively, and they also save energy, which is nice. So if you have an area where a lot of sun comes in and you want to block that sun, this film works very well to reduce bird collisions, save energy, and it works extremely well. And it can be power washed too if you want to. I do want to point out that this is from the inside of the building, that the building on the left here. This is what it looks like from the inside. This is Hartwick Pines, for those of you who might know Michigan. And you can see that you can hardly see the film from the inside. And they actually put suet feeders out right outside this window, and pileated woodpeckers come and eat the suet, and kids can get like inches from it. And they're just thrilled that they can get so close to a bird, and the bird doesn't even see them, but they can get very close to it. You can see the hawk silhouettes at the top of the window. Those didn't work. That's why they have the film. So you can see there's different options with different aesthetics, and all of them very effective. If you're building a building from scratch, you can go even farther with glass that is etched or with fritting. There's different new technologies and glass types. On the right, you have block glass, glazings, etc. So there are many different options, many different costs, many different looks to all of this. But the idea is to let the birds know that the glass is an obstruction and not something that they can fly into or through. So what doesn't work? Unfortunately, the hawk silhouettes do not work. Neither do the decals, as you see on the right next to the cat, unless they're applied in very high density, which is probably a density that you may not want for your aesthetic. So remember that they are often sold as a method to reduce bird collisions, and unfortunately, I wish they worked, but they don't. Birds just fly between them. So I will give credit to the person on the right for keeping their cat indoors. That's an important thing to keep birds safe. But the point of this slide is to keep the products very close together, 2 by 2 inches apart, and that the products need to be applied on the outside of the window. All right, so what about lights? I briefly mentioned lights. Well, ever since we first built lighthouses and communications towers, and anything with light at night, we knew that birds were attracted into those structures, and often resulting in fatalities. And that's still the case. We have made progress on some structures, like the communications tower in the middle, where we now flash lights, which is a great success thanks to research we did in Michigan with some of the people in this room. But we now know that we can reduce bird collisions by flashing lights, but that's not always an option with lit structures. So we know birds are attracted into like the gas pipe pumping facility, gas drilling facility on the upper right, lighthouses, communications towers if their lights do not flash, and then big cities and even cruise ships. We know that birds are attracted at many different scales. What does this mean? That means if you imagine tonight a huge flock of birds at 10 p.m., they lift off from NCTC and they start flying. When they encounter a lit area, that could be a larger city area, they will be drawn towards that city. And so we have birds that are accumulating in urban areas due to the attraction into that light. Even if they're a long distance away from it, they will see that light and be drawn into it. We know that once they get into that lit area, that they will be actually drawn into the light itself, whether that be a light post or a lit up window in a building, or even the Washington Monument, unfortunately, it draws in migratory birds. It doesn't even have glass on it, but it is a big, bright, white, lit up structure, and it is involved in bird fatalities often. And so this is something that we are familiar with. We have studied it. Now we have radar technologies to study it even further. And we do know that birds are attracted and drawn into lit facilities, lit structures, lit urban areas, which puts them at risk for harm from other human-caused effects. We also know that light is increasing dramatically. Maybe people in this room can remember times when the skies were darker at night. And you're not alone. We are seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of lighting every year. And this is a problem in many ways. And we're going to talk about some of those problems now. The effects of lighting on wildlife. We maybe have heard about sea turtles and the challenges of baby sea turtles when they come out of the nest and they start making their way to urban lit up areas instead of the ocean. The ocean used to reflect moonlight and be the brightest thing when they crawled out from under the sand, and now it's not anymore. The urban areas are. And so we know that it affects turtles. We also know that it affects coral and pollinators as well, insects. And so we understand that it affects wildlife beyond birds. We also are hearing more and more about the effects of nighttime lighting on people. We've heard, don't look at your phone or your computer too close to bedtime, right? And that's because this lighting kind of replicates what the moon would have been like for us, and it disrupts our circadian rhythms. It can increase our cancer rates. We have seen research that demonstrates that increased exposure to light increases cancer rates for both men and women. And it also, we feel safer when there's a lot of light, but we're not necessarily safer. If you look at the picture in the lower right-hand corner here, there's actually a person standing there. But you have to look pretty hard to see that person because of the glare. So we often associate more lights with more safety. But if that lighting is not done appropriately and not done correctly, it's not only polluting, wasting energy, but it's not making us any safer. And so we need to think about the quality of light and the way in which we're lighting things in order to make us truly safer and also protecting our environment. So it kind of gives us a false sense of security. Some of our underserved communities in the United States and around the world are also lit more than ours, that maybe some of those areas with more resources. So this is an environmental justice issue. So what does that mean? That means areas, people who are possibly impoverished or don't have the same resources that we do, they're also living with more light, which means poor sleep habits, higher cancer rates, possibly less safety. So it's an environmental justice issue of our urban areas that we can't neglect either. Night skies are a resource as well. I mean, I saw some heads nodding when I talked about the night sky. The night sky is part of our shared heritage, it's part of our culture, and it has historic significance as well. And so we don't want to lose that resource to light pollution. The great thing about this, when it comes to light pollution, it literally can be as easy as flipping a switch sometimes. And so I want us to remember that as we feel overwhelmed and think about, gosh, there's so many challenging things in the world. There are some things that don't have to be challenging. And that can include treating our glass to immediately almost eliminate bird collisions, and turning off our lights to immediately darken our environment and reduce bird collisions at our facilities, in our homes. How do we do that? We light when and where we need it. It's really that simple. When at night, we turn off our lights, we close our curtains if we can't, we reduce our landscape lighting, we talk to our neighbors about doing the same, we consider the problematic lighting that's shining on the ground, but it's also shining up into the sky unnecessarily. We can turn off lights with automatic controllers. We can downshield them to really focus the light on where we need them and not going up into the sky. And the last one is about using warmer color temperatures, maybe more orange versus blue. Turning off the lights and really limiting them being on at all is the most effective way to do that, but that's an option too. So remember when and where. Does this light need to be on? And is it shining on what we need it to shine on? So this is a science-based and win-win approach. Extinguishing light works. We've documented it scientifically. Van Doren et al. In Chicago determined that if you have a bunch of lights on in buildings, if you cut that in half, you can decrease collisions by as much as 11 times in the spring. So this works. Reducing bird collisions and light pollution also reduces energy costs and climate change, our carbon footprint. It improves our environmental justice issues. It helps us sleep. It reduces our cancer risks. So a growing number of communities are actually adopting lights out programs, as well as glass retrofit ordinances. We are making progress on this issue. It's becoming more and more well known. We have World Migratory Bird Day a couple years ago, too. Dim the lights for birds at night. The Gateway Arch actually is going dark during migration, which is pretty exciting. And we have celebrities paying attention to this issue and really encouraging us to make a change this way, to change our relationship with lighting. And we have engagement across many sectors. And it's not just people who love birds. It's people who love night skies, people who sell lights. We have architects, engineers, city planners, people who are interested in environmental justice. We are paying attention to these issues, and we are starting to make progress. So what's the Fish and Wildlife Service doing? This is a pretty cool thing I'm excited to talk about. This is our Bird Safe Building Survey. So we knew that if the Fish and Wildlife Service was going to talk about treating glass and turning off lights, that we needed to really understand what this was about and do it ourselves. And so what did we do? Well, we developed an interactive mapping system with almost all of our facilities. We took out the things like outhouses and pole barns without windows that we didn't want to have to survey. But all the rest of our buildings, which was well over 3,000 buildings across the United States, We had them all in a mapping system, and we came up with a very quick survey so people could assess, is this a high-risk building, or is it not? And then we were able to prioritize which buildings were engaged in more fatalities or providing higher risk, and we were able to focus on those buildings and start treating them. So we have made significant progress. We're over 90% of our buildings surveyed, and then we were able to prioritize and start treating that glass, retrofitting the glass, working on the lighting systems, so that we can, put our money where our mouths are, right? So we can do this work, learn from it, and then share. We are also working on educating people beyond that. So I'm going to share with you some images of that. This is these are all our buildings in the next several slides. You can see the sign here, which is educational. It tells people about this issue and how they can make a difference. You can see some dots on the outside of this glass. Here's some film up above. And I have some inside information that tells me this building is killing no birds except for right there. See how they didn't want to cover up the Fish and Wildlife Service logo, and a bird hit there. So yeah, this stuff works. It works very well. And we're educating people with our signage. This is another example. Here's a paracord example. We are making it a social event. So I know some of the folks in this room, they made it a big social event to treat their office. I think you guys had a cookout, or you should have if you didn't. And you had fun, you treated your glass, and now you can feel good about that. And it was also a community building event. We've used some of the films with pretty pictures on them. If you look at this picture, I always have to look for the dots. You can see them if you look carefully, but you can, again, see that it does not change the aesthetic of the building, but it does significantly reduce bird collisions. Here's that pretty film again. Excellent examples. And look, there's Randy, and they're treating NCTC right there. They're putting up their paracord curtains right there. Not everybody needs a lift to do that. I don't have a lift, and I have my windows, many of them treated at my house. So there are many options, and we are making great progress at the Fish and Wildlife Service with a diversity of aesthetics, with low budgets, and we are putting this together and really doing a great job. We also had a summit or a workshop right here in this room where we brought together a lot of diverse people, all thinking about night skies and treating glass and birds and history and the night sky resource and human health, and we brought them all together and really talked about how we could work together better, share messaging, share resources, share information, share each other's messages. We can share the dark skies. I just shared dark skies information with you tonight. I maybe wouldn't have done that if we hadn't had this summit, and I wouldn't have learned more about it. I learned about human health. I can share that with you now. And the human health people are talking about birds. The night skies people are talking about birds and treating glass. And so we're all working together better now. And in a time of separate people not feeling connected and not feeling connected to nature and not feeling hopeful sometimes, this was a real source of hope and a source of working together and community and gaining momentum as a unit. So I encourage you to think about this, to join us in treating your own glass so we can reduce daytime collisions, turning off interior-exterior lights whenever possible, especially those lights that are facing the sky or illuminating the landscape. We can install motion detectors or motion sensors for those lights and to share the good news to educate others. So that is really important. And I think all of us in this room are convinced birds are awesome. We want to protect them. And yeah, there's probably something we can do. How about our neighbors? How about our friends? I'm sure if you start talking to your neighbors and friends, they've heard that thump on the outside of their windows and their homes, and they don't like it. Nobody likes it. And so this is a really important opportunity for us to spread the word. I know my mom, I talked about my mom, and she was feeding the birds. She still feeds the birds, loves the birds. And she was also causing a lot of fatalities at her kitchen window. And she hung the like little sailboat decals on the inside of the window and sun catchers. None of it worked. She needed something on the outside of her glass, and she needed it in a 2x2 grid, as we were mentioning, right? If you go home with nothing else, think 2x2 and turn off lights. But she didn't have the 2x2 grid, and she was killing a lot of birds. And so when I knew about that and the weather warmed up, I went and I treated the outside of that window. She's never been happier. She told me, I don't want my house to look weird, and I don't want it to block my view of the bird feeder. Totally fair comments, right? She has never been happier with that 2x2 grid. She tells me she has more birds in her bird feeder than ever, and she's convinced it's because I treated the glass. And she's telling her friends, and she's handing out brochures. She even bought some of the product and shared it with her local humane society, which has a lot of windows and was also involved in bird collisions. And so she's spreading the word. We posted on social media. I posted on my account. I had people I went to high school with I haven't talked to since high school, and they were excited. And they said, we kill birds too, and we didn't like it. Where do you find this stuff? So even if you're not a bird person and you're not in this room and you don't have a bird feeder, people still don't want to kill birds. And this is a growing number of people, a growing community of people who are taking a stand and changing their glass and feeling good about it. So I encourage you to not only treat your glass and turn off your lights, but to talk to others about it. Share the news. Share it on social media. And we do have reasons to be optimistic. I shared the loss of 3 billion birds. It's heartbreaking. It's hard. I'm watching it before my own eyes as I care about birds. And it's hard. But there are reasons for optimism. During the same 50 years that we lost so many migratory songbirds, we gained more than 50 million birds of prey or raptors, 35 million waterfowl, ducks and geese. We saw increases. Woodpeckers have also increased. So while we were seeing songbirds decline, raptors, ducks, geese, many species were increasing. Why is that? Because we knew what to do and we did it. And we often did it in partnership with some of these topics like waterfowl. A lot of partners worked together, but we knew what to do and we followed through and we did it. That's why we have 15 million more raptors and 35 million more ducks and geese, because we did it. And we can do this. There's a lot of reason for optimism and hope. And so I encourage you to go home and think about that. And in addition to, as you crawl into bed, think about, there's a lot of migratory birds getting ready to fly tonight, and it's very cool. Think about, what am I going to do to make it easier for them? And who am I going to tell to also do that? So when you leave here tonight, think about that. This is a cool topic. It's interesting. There's a lot of hope. And I hope that we all follow through and do something with that. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for chatting with me.
I'm Catherine Blaylock, and I'm a biologist at the National Conservation Training Center, and I'm here with Joelle Gehring. She is a biologist in the division, or in the Migratory Birds Program in the Division of Bird Conservation, Permits, and Regulations with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Welcome, Joelle.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. Throughout her career, she has been working on and focused on human-wildlife conflict, and she is working on reducing bird collisions with buildings and glass, and specifically lights as well. Mm-hmm. So today we're going to talk about how to make the world safer for both birds and people. Mm-hmm. So Joelle, first question. So what made you pursue a career in wildlife conservation?
Mm. Boy, it's been a wonderful career, and I really wanted to make a difference in the world, and I also love being outside. And so, like many wildlife biologists, we start our careers outside, trying to do fun things. And then eventually you end up in an office applying what you learned outside and sharing that with the rest of the world. And so I am very happy with the way that my career has developed. And I'm very excited that I can actually fulfill that dream that I had as a kid of contributing to the world and to make the world safer for wildlife and people too.
Nice, thank you for sharing. It's always fun to learn how people get into the Fish and Wildlife Service. Since we're talking about birds today and bird collisions, I was wondering if you had a favorite species of birds or maybe a special memory with birds.
Oh, so many special memories and so many favorite birds. I started off, my first field job was with northern goshawks in central Pennsylvania, and they're not a songbird, which is what I focus my work on now, but they are bold and beautiful and strong and very protective of their nests and their young. And they live in beautiful places, hemlocks and mature forests. And so I have to say that's always the go-to bird as one of my favorites, but my gosh, there's so many. The Swainson's thrush, I had the opportunity to see in both their breeding grounds and in their migration and some of their wintering grounds.
It's cool.
And they are also beautiful and travel such long distances as migrants and have a beautiful song. It's hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah, nice. Birds are one of the most well-studied groups of animals. They're widespread. You can practically find them everywhere. They're easy to observe, and they're just a joy to watch, as you were talking about. But I think we shouldn't take birds for granted. You know, I think no matter where you are or what time of year, you can always see birds, but we're finding that we can't or shouldn't take birds for granted. Can you give an overview of bird populations in the last 50 years to present?
Yes, that's a great question. And there are birds everywhere, and except the moon. That's the one place we don't have birds. And they are a real integral part of our lives, whether that be watching them or listening to them in the morning. And I have fond memories of going to sleep listening to American robins as a kid and waking up to American robins. But you know, those bird populations have changed since I was a kid. And in my lifetime, we have seen and documented significant declines in bird populations. And that is evident in some species more than others, with our migratory songbirds suffering some of the biggest losses. We've lost about 3 billion birds in the last 50 years. That's
incredible.
About 30% of bird populations. I remember when things were different.
50%.
30%.
30%.
Almost 30%, yes.
Wow.
And I remember when populations were different. And that I remember teaching my son, who's 24, teaching him, the song of the eastern meadowlark. And I could go to some of those places now and not hear the eastern meadowlark, which has suffered significant declines in its population. I remember riding my horse in some pastures near where he lives and seeing bobolinks. And bobolinks are no longer nesting there. And so we have seen significant declines that I myself have been able to observe, and I bet other people have as well. That being said, when we know what to do to protect migratory birds and we follow through and we do it, so when we know what to do and we do it, we can change those trajectories and those populations.
And have a powerful impact.
We have a powerful impact. And so birds like raptors or birds of prey and waterfowl and woodpeckers, those populations have seen significant increases in the last 50 years. And so I think as we talk about the losses that we've experienced, we also need to remember that we have the power to change that. If we work together in partnership and we know what to do and we do it, we can make a difference.
Very cool. Yeah, that's exciting to see some of the upward trends too.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
What are some of the major threats to the smaller songbirds?
Well, often we go to habitat loss. So what is habitat? It's where they live. It's where they breed, where they migrate through, and where they spend their winters, and then back and forth for these migratory birds. And habitat loss has been significant. If you can imagine, the home that we are all familiar living with, if that has changed significantly, or if we were to lose that, what would we do? Would we be able to find another one? Would it be as good? How would it interfere with the rest of our lives, our ability to reproduce, to find food where we need it, when we need it, as much as we need it, to feed our offspring, etc. So if you can imagine what that would be like to have habitat change and loss so dramatically as we've seen in the last 50 years. We also have other anthropogenic effects, such as collisions with tall structures, whether that be buildings or communications towers, or collisions with not necessarily tall things, but homes, glass, etc., attraction into lights. Those are all things that have played a role in the loss of our bird populations. And it's not just the United States. We're the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. But the birds that we work with, many of them breed and live in north of our borders and spend their winters far south of our borders. So it's really an international issue. Yeah. And the things that we're doing here in the United States, we need to think about applying that beyond our borders as well. These birds do not pay attention to the borders. They just live their lives and breed and migrate and winter and do it again.
That's fantastic. Yeah, superheroes.
They are, yes, they are.
So you mentioned bird collisions.
Yes.
Why do birds collide with glass?
Yes, well, there are a couple different reasons. And, we think of a world where we understand what glass is. We see a building with a rectangular hole in it, and we think that's a window. Birds have not evolved or are not familiar with that concept. And so they don't always understand that if they can look through this hole in the wall to see through to some vegetation or habitat in their minds on the other side, or all the way through a building possibly, that it's safe to go through. They do not see glass as an obstacle. I would say also
because it's reflecting that habitat?
Well, or they can see through it, so they fly through situations
gotcha.
where they think they can fly through, like a transparent noise barrier along a highway or a zoo barrier to keep people and animals safe. And so they don't understand that they can't fly through that. And then you just mentioned reflections, probably even more cases than being able to, than thinking they can fly through, is they see a reflection of vegetation or the sky. And they don't understand that that's just a reflection. It's not actual habitat for them. So they'll fly into it in that case as well. And so they just don't see glass as an obstacle. And we have ways to fix that, which I'm eager to talk about in a little bit. But that is the ongoing issue. They also can be attracted. Why are they near the glass to begin with? Well, they are attracted into lit facilities, lit structures. That's not something that they are used to as well. They haven't evolved with that either. And so lights attract in migratory birds very similar to a moth to a porch light. And they accumulate in lit areas, which exposes them to other risks, bird collisions with vehicles, or pets, or glass, or whatever. That there are a lot of risks around humans. And so
it's interesting for the combination of light pollution with bird collision, like light is playing a major role.
It is.
In the bird collision piece.
And science has documented that birds are attracted to lights at multiple scales. So it's not just, we happen to be next to the light, we're going to fly towards it. It is during their long distance migrations, which is just an incredible feat in its own. When they're flying at high altitudes, they are more likely to fly toward a lit urban area versus a dark area that probably has more habitat for them.
Is that because they're disoriented by the light, or maybe they're drawn to the light as if it's the sun?
A bit of both.
Okay.
Yes, we do see, our science demonstrates, whether that be a communications tower or a lighthouse or an oil platform in the middle of the ocean or an urban area, or an oil and gas facility, anything that's, or a stadium that's lit up, or a cruise ship, anything that's brightly lit. Science has demonstrated birds deviating from their normal flight path toward the lit area. We have shown that with radar technology. We have shown that in multiple studies that birds are indeed attracted into lit structures and lit facilities and lit areas. So once they're attracted into the lit area, then they're attracted into the area that's more lit and at the actual light source. And if that light source includes glass, of course they're going to collide with the glass. Although some have suggested that the birds are attracted into the lit area, they may land in nearby vegetation, and then in the morning when the sun comes up, they may be attracted, or they may be confused by the reflection in the glass and collide at that time. So the two issues are intertwined, but also independently dangerous for birds.
What kinds of structures or building designs are causing the most fatal collisions?
Yes, so there was a great study by Lost et al. That looked at many different types of glass buildings. He did not include a lot of the light components, but if you just look at glass facilities, glass structures, we often think about the tall skyscrapers.
Yeah, that's where my mind goes
me too.
In big cities.
Yeah, when I first got this job and my supervisor said, I want you to work on glass and bird collisions, I thought skyscrapers. When you look at the actual data, yes, skyscrapers and tall buildings are involved in fatal collisions, and we hear about those a lot. If you think about the numbers of skyscrapers or tall buildings that you've experienced compared to the numbers of homes, low-rise buildings, whether that be a dentist office or a place of worship or a park headquarters.
But like 2 to 4 story tall buildings, even houses.
Yes, these low-rise buildings. How many of those are on the landscape compared to the skyscraper?
Yeah, good point.
When you look at the overall number, those low-rise buildings and homes are causing the vast majority, almost all of the fatalities. The tall buildings are involved as well, but there are just far fewer of those. So basically my point is that any building with glass or that's lit up on the side
Poses a threat.
It poses a threat, which while it feels overwhelming, it's also empowering because each one of us has connections to a low-rise building or a home, right? And we can all make an impact. So while the responsibility seems overwhelming and huge, it's also empowering because we can all make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of backing up, when we say bird collisions, what kinds of birds are we talking about?
Yes, these are, I mentioned northern goshawk,
Yes.
or I guess they changed his name recently, but the goshawk is one of my favorites. Yes, they're awesome. They're not as likely to be a bird that's going to collide with a facility, but it's the songbirds. It's the smaller birds, the birds that we don't even necessarily see at our bird feeders. Yes, some of them are songbirds, but we're talking about long-distance migrants. So warblers, vireos, tanagers, sparrows, hummingbirds too. Any bird can hit glass. It can be confused. Any bird can be confused by glass. We've had ruffed grouse and mallards colliding with glass. Roadrunners have collided with glass.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So any bird can. People can collide with glass. We've seen those too. But when you're asking what are the most common birds colliding with glass, it is those songbirds, those long distance migrants that are breeding in the northern habitats and quickly trying to set up nest, raise their young, and then get back down
Home,
to
yeah,
their
for winter.
to their wintering sites. And these birds are incredible. They fly long distances that I would never attempt without a GPS and a long bit of vacation time. These are long trips, and these birds are fueling up beforehand, which means they have to have good habitat to get lots of body fat, and then they are taking off at night. So when they're not usually night flyers. These are birds that their vision is not a lot different than ours when it comes to day versus night vision.
That's interesting.
But they've over many years they have developed the ability to migrate at night. The weather, we ask why. Well, it could be that they're navigating off of the stars. We know that they're using stellar constellations or the stars for navigation. We know that the weather patterns are a little bit more stable at night. We know a lot of the aerial predators are not flying around at night, so they might be a little bit safer. But regardless of why it happened, they're night migrants. And so when the sun goes down about 10 p.m., they start moving. And they will go up. I still get goosebumps talking about it. It's so cool. They will fly in big flocks with many species in those flocks. They'll use flight calls, little to communicate with each other, and they will stay together as a big flock and go up to fairly high, thousands of feet of altitude and fly long distances that, you and I would never consider traveling in a night by foot.
Yeah.
And they travel these long distances using stellar constellations. When we think about that, I think, oh, they're looking at the stars. Well, think about that. The stars aren't moving, but the planet is. So those constellations are appearing to move throughout the night, and they are still using those stars to navigate. What if it's cloudy? Well, they can also use magnetic fields of the Earth to navigate. They
so
can
cool.
I know, isn't it? And then they can use sunrise and sunset to navigate. They can use polarization of light along the horizon to navigate. Sometimes they'll use landscape features, maybe the Mississippi River, to help them navigate. So it depends. What I've read is that they'll use these different variables to help them navigate depending on the situation, depending on the night. So it's very complicated, and then they have to get somewhere and find food because they have to do it again the next day. So it is not an easy journey, and so when they are exposed to things like light, they can become confused, and laboratory studies have shown that exposure to some colors of light actually interferes with their ability to use magnetic fields for navigation. So something chemically is going on with them, as well as just probably general confusion by the light. So,
Very cool. That's fantastic.
I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did, yes. So I wanted to ask, you've mentioned it a little bit, but the technologies to track bird migrations, to be able to forecast when to turn lights out.
Yes.
Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yes, so we've all seen growth of technology in our lifetimes, and ornithology and study of birds is no exception to that. And the technical folks at Cornell Lab of Ornithology have developed Birdcast, which is so exciting. It's beautiful. If you can't get your kids off of electronics, I suggest that you direct them to Birdcast because it's so fun to look at and predict. It actually predicts the numbers of migrating birds that are expected to fly over the United States each night.
Very
and they predicted a couple nights in advance. I was just looking at it a couple hours ago.
Nice.
and looking at how many millions of birds will be flying over us tonight while we sleep.
Really?
Yes, and there are certain nights where you can actually hear their flight
Are
calls.
waterfowl moving in the months of September? Or?
Yes, waterfowl, they do also move in the spring and the fall. They tend to move at different times of the day maybe than the songbirds do, have a slightly different migration approach, and but they are also migrating in the spring and fall as well.
That's really cool. So that's powerful.
Birdcast is very powerful, and
Yeah.
Birdcast has indeed linked, and they're using NextRad weather data. So the same type of weather data that we use to predict our storms and to kind of, get a feel for, is there dangerous weather coming? Is there any weather coming? That same technology is used in a slightly different way to look at the numbers of migratory birds, or the volume of migratory birds flying over, which correlates to a number. And then they can actually link that to, hey, tonight is a night that you really need to extinguish your lights so you're not drawing birds into your facility.
Draw your curtains.
Draw your curtains, yes.
So let's get into some of the solutions
Absolutely.
to safeguard our windows, to decrease light pollution.
Yes, and it really is a two-pronged approach for us as a society. We need to remember to extinguish our lights, but also treat our glass. They're both very important and pretty hard to separate as to which one we should do or which one should we not do. We really need to be doing both. And for the reasons that I've mentioned earlier, lights draw birds into a facility or a structure, and then they often collide with the glass, if there's glass there, or even if it's just a bright white surface. For example, unfortunately, as beautiful as the Washington Monument is, it's involved with bird collisions. It's a bright white lit structure, and there's almost no glass on it, but the birds are still colliding with it. So what we can do is extinguish lights, only using lights when and where we need them. As a society, and I'm guilty of this as well, we seem to think the more lights, the safer we are. But that's not always the case. Light has risks for exposure to light at night has risks for everyone and everything. It's harmful to the ecosystem. It fails to protect our night skies, which are really a resource. Our night skies are linked to our history, to our culture, and the ability to see the stars and the experiences we've had night sky viewing. And viewing the northern lights, it's been a great 6 months or so for viewing the northern lights. I'm not sure if you've had an opportunity to see it. But exposure to night lights reduces our ability as people to experience those cultural and historical experiences.
I was reading an interesting stat that like 80% of people worldwide live under light polluted skies.
That's right.
And 80% of Americans don't see the Milky Way any longer
That's
because
right.
of light pollution. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a cultural and historical loss. But it goes beyond that. Exposure to light is harmful to our health. We've heard, don't be on your phone or your computer.
now that's like blue light, right? On our
Blue
phones?
light, but it's really any light.
Okay.
Even white light includes all different colors of light. And so it's really all light, with blue light being probably the most harmful. But exposure to light increases cancer risks. It decreases our ability to sleep well at night. And it's just generally dangerous to us. We aren't used to sleeping in bright lights. It's not healthy for us. And we have data to support that in the health communities. We also understand that you mentioned the percentage of people that are exposed to light. Given those hazards, we also understand that this is an environmental justice issue. We have underserved communities with higher light exposure, more exposure to light than other communities. So this is really an issue of justice as well. with urban areas experiencing more light pollution, less exposure to the Milky Way and those cultural and
Right.
historical resources, as well as increased health risks. So it's an environmental justice issue, it's a health issue, it's a historic and a cultural issue.
An energy issue,
Energy
too.
issue,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's an environmental issue with challenging our ecosystems, our, sea turtles, you mentioned sea turtles earlier in our chatting, and coral, and just plants as well. We're all affected negatively by light exposure at night. Even though we think it might be safer for us, we have issues with glare where, it's not necessarily safer. I mean, looking at you and there's lights up above you, I can't see what's beyond that.
Yeah.
That doesn't
blind spot.
A blind spot, yes. So there are many issues: health, cultural, historical, environmental, justice as well. So that's just the exposure to light, but only lighting when and where we need it solves that problem.
Yeah.
Often as simple as switching off a light.
Dim the night sky.
Dim the night
Lights out
skies.
initiatives.
Lights out
Right.
initiatives. That's the light component. You asked, how can we solve this? That's the light component, which has many different benefits. Let's talk about glass.
Yeah.
So because these issues are very tied together. And we cannot just turn off lights and expect this bird collision issue to be solved. It's not. We have to also address glass. And the glass issue is also pretty simple. Sometimes we're even saving energy by saving birds at the same time. So the issue is we want to make the glass visible to birds. We want them to understand that glass is not something they can fly into or through. It's an obstacle. And so we do that by adhering to the external surface of the glass. So the outside of the glass, we need to have some kind of pattern that, even if it's as small as a pencil eraser, in a 2 inch by 2 inch grid. So that's critical. I know.
Why that size?
Why that size? Great question. Birds are great at maneuvering among vegetation.
Yeah. Very aerodynamic.
Very aerodynamic. So they may see a little spot and they think, I'm going to fly into that vegetation between
Gotcha.
those two decals. Well, they can't, because it's glass in between. It's only a reflection of vegetation. It's not real. But they think they can fly through it. So at first, and historically we used to say 4 inch by 2 inch. And I'm only going to say that once because I don't want people to that stick in their mind. And then we realized hummingbirds think they can fly through much smaller spots. So we changed it to 2 inch by 2 inch
And that's
grids.
pretty effective.
It is extremely effective.
That's exciting.
It is extremely effective. My mom loves to feed birds, as many Americans do. We have 96 million people who enjoy watching birds in the United States. Yes, 96. We are not alone. We are not alone. Lots of people enjoy watching birds, and they make them a part of their lives. Birds are a part of our lives, and we're a part of the birds' lives. And my mom is a great example. She feeds the birds. That was a great part of her mental well-being and health during the pandemic, especially. She was feeding the birds and telling me what was there and what was not there and when they were going to arrive. And she was also killing birds at her kitchen window, birds that she loved. And it bothered her very much. And so she was hanging sun catchers on the inside of her window and hoping it would help. And she had so many sun catchers on the inside of her kitchen window.
That's a good idea.
And it was not working.
Oh, okay.
Because the reflection was still on the outside of the glass. So the sun catchers were on the inside, but the birds were seeing the reflections on the outside.
Still a barrier.
They still did not understand that the glass was a barrier. And so I was able to help her and apply a matrix of dots on the outside of her window.
Kind of like sticker decals?
Yes,
sort of thing?
It's more easy to apply than just individual stickers.
Yeah.
It comes in an entire sheet,
Very
or
cool.
it can come in strips. And those dots, 2 inches by 2 inches apart, they're just tiny dots. They have solved her problem. And she is so thrilled that she is sharing it with her friends and telling
Spreading
everyone
the
about
word.
it. Yeah, she actually bought some for her local Humane Society because
Very
they had
cool.
windows and were suffering from bird collisions. And so she did a few important steps there. My mom did. One, she loves birds, and she was upset by the collisions that were happening, and so she took action. And we applied the film on the outside of the glass, and it does not obstruct her view. She thinks it's fine. She's proud of it. And then she's sharing the news and spreading the word. And so it's a growing positive benefit. And she's not alone. Many people, more and more people, are understanding the risk that their glass provides or presents to birds, and they're taking action to stop that, and they're proud of it, and they're sharing the news. We shared it on social media. Her friends were asking questions about it.
And everyone's excited.
Everyone's
and wanting to
excited.
follow along.
Yep. And more people. It is growing and growing every day. The number of people who are taking action to reduce their collisions with migratory birds. And my mom is more connected to her birds than ever. And she's proud of it, and she's sharing it. And so, again, birds are a part of her life, and she's also a part of their lives. And birds connect us to one another as people and to our environment.
Yeah, it sounds like a win-win for
It
both
really
people
is.
and birds.
Yes, and you mentioned win-win, and I neglected to mention that some films, not the particular film that I used at my mom's house, but some films, kind of like a bus wrap that you'd see. I don't know if you've ever experienced the bus wrap stuff where you can see out perfectly, but people can't see in very easily. Those bus wrap type films actually also increase energy efficiency.
Very cool.
So yes, or here's another example. I see this all the time now. You know, I was at a really amazing Mexican restaurant the other day, and they had beautiful film on the outside showing their menu items, which were all delicious, and the film was simultaneously advertising for them. It was attractive, and it was saving them energy, and
Very
basically
efficient.
eliminating bird collisions.
Very cool.
Yes, so that's a win-win-win.
Nice.
And the food was great.
So what are some of, I know NCTC is actively working on making our campus bird safe and more bird friendly. What are some Fish and Wildlife Service or beyond initiatives to help with bird safe efforts?
Yes, well, we really are trying to spread the word about these opportunities and these options. We already have many NGOs that are working on this issue, and we're very excited and happy to be partnering with them to benefit from one another and to help one another out, to spread the word more and farther about the options to reduce bird collisions and save energy in many cases. So we are trying to, regarding beyond just the Fish and Wildlife Service, we're really trying to spread the word to the general public about these opportunities and to let them know that they're not alone, that there are 96 million other people who are interested in this issue, and many people and a growing number of people are starting to treat their glass, turn off their lights, and know that they're doing a good thing for birds while they're oftentimes saving energy. So those are some of the things we're doing external to the Fish and Wildlife Service. Internal, we really knew that we needed to start at home. Right? You know, put our money where the mouth was, put our efforts where what we're saying. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been really trying to understand where some of our challenging facilities are. Where are we lighting too much? Where do we have large surface areas of glass that are involved in bird fatalities? And where can we start treating our own glass and turning off our own lights so that we reduce fatalities? So we've been doing an amazing job. I'm not patting myself on the back, I'm patting my colleagues and our team on the back. It's really exciting to be involved in this. And my colleagues have really been working we developed a mapping system for where are all of our Fish and Wildlife Service facilities. Those data were already out there. We put it into a very interactive mapping system as a team. And then we started having people across the country for the Fish and Wildlife Service say, can you survey your building? It's a survey that I literally completed one in I think it was 90 seconds. I just did the survey very quickly. It's pretty quick to assess which buildings have a lot of glass, and is there light escape at night, etc. And so we quickly surveyed almost all. We are over 90% of our facilities for the Fish and Wildlife Service across the United States, which is over 3,000 buildings, have been surveyed to assess the risk to migratory birds. And that's great. You can assess it, but then what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And that's true for all of us. We can say, yeah, I know birds are hitting my sliding glass door. I don't like it. Okay, what are you going to do about it? And so that's what we did at the Fish and Wildlife. We said we know which buildings are our highest risk. We were able to rank them and say this facility is pretty high risk. This one's a pole barn. It's not very high risk. Has just a little glass on the door. But how can we start making progress on those high risk buildings? And so that's what we've been doing. We've been treating glass. We've been finding bits of money here and bits of money there.
And using it strategically.
And so we have been treating our glass, and then we also take it to the next step as do we treat our lights, and we tell people about it. We set an example and we share it. Because how do we, we learn a lot from our friends and our colleagues and our family members and our neighbors. And so we've been trying to be a good neighbor and a good friend to the general public and share that information. Nobody likes to kill birds. Yeah. Nobody likes to walk out onto their deck and see an injured bird. We don't like that. Yeah. So let's help each other out and learn how to do it, how to fix it. It's not hard. It saves us energy. My mom, when I treated her glass, she said, well, I don't want my house to look weird and I want to be able to see out my window. That's fair.
So imagine those efforts, people kind of taking charge and safeguarding their glass and turning their lights out when they need to, and kind of paying attention to when the birds are migrating. So kind of thinking to the future, what does that look like for birds maybe 15 years down the road?
Yeah. Well, I hope it looks great.
Yeah.
So I see many different positives of that. Of course, I hope that we can start making a dent in that more than a billion birds a year in the United States colliding with glass and dying fatally. And that's another thing I want to mention. I'm going to lose sight of your excellent question, but I want to point out that oftentimes birds will hit glass and we think that they're going to be okay. I've done that. I brought the bird in, put it in a box, thinking it's okay. Okay, he kind of woke up. He's going to be okay, and he flies away. But if you think of the damage of a concussion, I've suffered a concussion from downhill skiing. My son took me down a black diamond, and I wasn't ready, and I got a concussion. Like yes, I got a concussion, and it took me weeks to get over that. I had food in the cupboard, a job, a warm house. I was safe.
Imagine a bird.
Imagine a bird.
Yeah.
They have to still go out and forage, possibly feed their young if they have young. They have to migrate at some point. They have to stay safe from predators. And it puts them in a very tough situation to have a bleeding brain in that situation. And so most of those birds end up dying. We do have data to that, to document that most of those birds are dying even if they initially fly away. So the goal is stop it where you can. So going back to your question, what do we see as a future? I see a future where people understand their connection to birds and glass and lighting, where if they see a lights out program in a city, or they see the Washington Monument that's suddenly dark. Why is the Washington Monument dark? Oh, it's September.
We're protecting the birds.
We're protecting the birds. When you see pink football cleats in the NFL, you think breast cancer awareness. I want people to see dark skies, and I want people to see dots on glass or films on glass and think, oh, birds. That's what I hope in the next 15 years.
That's fantastic.
And I think it's extremely possible. And I'm excited about it because that's where we grow momentum and that's where we grow understanding. And that's good for birds, and it's also good for people. We live in a world where it's challenging to make a difference sometimes. We see a lot of challenges in the world. This is not that situation. We can make a difference. Each one of us can make a difference. And it's empowering and it's exciting. And so it's not just about protecting migratory birds, which is incredibly important and very close, very, very close to my heart. It's about connecting people to nature and empowering them to make the world a better place, which we can easily do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joelle.
Yes.
I love your energy and your enthusiasm, and we can make the world bird safe and bird friendly, so I challenge you to do so. Well, thank you to our listeners, and if you want to learn more, you can visit www.fws.gov/broadcast with an S on the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a pleasure.
Thanks, mine too.